YouTube, happy Saturday. This will probably be one of my last videos that I do before hopping on that jet plane and leaving Massachusetts behind in 2015 so that I can go to my husband in Georgia and also go to spend the holidays with my parents in Kentucky and my sister in New Orleans. So I'm really excited about that. I leave on the 16th, so that is in 4 días. Oh, thank the Lord, baby Jesus. So I'm in the middle of paper writing, and first of all I would like to apologize to Travis, the pagan scholar, aka my giveaway winner. I'd like to apologize that I will not be able to include the scarf in the giveaway prize. I'm in the middle of writing my final papers, and even though I've been doing my daily yoga practice to make sure I move my body a little bit, I think just sitting at the computer on top of the stress of academic writing, which, Travis, you know how hard it can be, and for anyone else who's ever done academic writing, it's fucking hard. It's a wear and tear on your body. So for the past few years, I've been struggling with a pain that starts up here. Maybe I have a pinched nerve or something, or some sort of muscle thing going on in my neck. But my stress always starts off here, and it goes all the way down, goes through my right shoulder, down my right arm, and into my right wrist and hand, especially my thumb. It hasn't been too bad. I've been able to control it thanks to the 20 or 25 minutes or so of yoga that I do every morning, but yeah, I don't want to push it. I don't want to knit and have that cause my wrist and everything to get worse. So I apologize about that. I probably will be able to finish that scarf and send it to you after the holidays have passed and once the spring semester is back in gear in February. So that will be a little February present. That'll be the giveaway present part 2. How about that? Speaking of final papers, I'm working on my medieval exam. I study... I'm about to get really academic here, and I'm really sorry. I study U.S. Latino contemporary, 20th, 21st century U.S. Latino literature, culture, and performance. And I incorporate a lot of queer theory into what I do. And I know the term queer has been used in a pejorative sense as an attack at specific groups of people, but at least in academia for the past 30 or 40 years or so, it's a fairly new field, but queer theory, along with women's and gender studies or feminist studies, the two have kind of arisen in academia and have gained respect. It's still not as respected as the more canonical types of theory, but it's gaining traction. So, and it's being revamped. And I think I'm part of that wave trying to revamp it. So, queer theory, feminist theory, all that jazz is my lens for studying U.S. Latino performance and literature. Contemporary U.S. Latino. Authors like Junot Diaz, I'm looking at my bookshelf right now. Gloria Anzaldúa, Junot Diaz, Ana Castillo, Cherry Moraga, I'm just naming off, Chela Sandoval. These are some of the more well-known authors. There are many, many, many more. So it's weird that I have to take an exam on medieval Spanish literature. But it's a departmental requirement. Oh, and sorry, by the way, my hair is still wet from the shower, so you guys can deal with it. It's a departmental requirement I had to take a class, and now I have to take an exam on medieval Iberian, as in the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal and Spain, medieval Iberian literature. And I've taken a course on medieval Portuguese and early modern literature. It was just a survey kind of course, and it was in Portuguese. The professor let me speak Spanish though, because I was just taking it for a language requirement. But anyway, neither here nor there. So that's what I want to do. That's the little singularity that I will specialize in in my PhD. So I was just thinking, and probably this is a really rambly video, but I was thinking about this video as, and this will probably be its title, as how do I mesh my spiritual philosophies with my academic work? And how do I do it in a kind of challenging situation, like having to write a medieval exam on medieval literature that I do not specialize in? That's a challenge. Kind of the curse of specialization is that you become so focused on one thing that you don't feel confident branching out. But you have to branch out. So that's the beauty of a PhD, I guess. You become super specialized in something, but in order to become specialized, you have to branch out in concentric circles and learn about the literature, in my case, literature of from related fields. So I've actually been able to transform this medieval Iberian literature into something that's related to what I want to do, you know, contemporary 20th, 21st century Latino literature. I did it, and I did it through queer theory. So let me dive into that. I'm also about to sit down and work on this paper, so maybe just talking about it to you guys will help me formulate my thoughts a little bit better. But luckily, it's just a 10 to 12 page paper. It's an exam, but it's a written exercise that the professor goes over, and then you have a 30-minute meeting with two professors. They talk to you about it, and there you go. You fulfilled the medieval requirement. At least that's how it's been working in my department now. So it's a 10 to 12 page paper, but I have to write it in Spanish. I'm kind of used to having to write my papers in Spanish, but actually as a professional, English will be my main language for writing and publication. I mean, for US Latino literature, the main audience of that is here in the United States. So basically for this paper, I have been incorporating queer theory into the reading of medieval texts, specifically hagiographies. And I have some notes here, hold on. These are notes from my Portuguese class. The word hagiography, the hagio has a Greek root, and it means saint. And the graphia, hagiography, or hagiografía in Spanish, it means from history. So it's the history of the saints. It's the stories of the saints' lives. For those of you who may be familiar with Catholicism in general, Roman Catholicism, you'll know about those books, The Lives of the Saints, for example. And these were incredibly popular in the in the early years of the church before the medieval period. So like after the Roman Empire switched over to Catholicism around the year 400 or so, from that to around the year 1000, hagiographies were a way of popularizing and mythologizing the lives of the saints, whether those saints were real historical people or just archetypes, you know. But the lives of the saints were a way that the church spread its ideology. And this ideology is misogynist, a superficial reading of this ideology, a superficial reading of the hagiographies from this period of late antiquity to the early medieval and into the medieval period. A superficial reading of the lives of the saints shows how they're misogynist. You know, all the female saints are virgins, and they die. They sacrifice themselves to preserve their virginity. You know, that kind of fetish-sized idea or idealization of female virginity and purity. You know, but a queer reading, a more nuanced reading of these texts, show how this ideology, how certain aspects of Roman Catholic ideology are intimately connected with the erotic, with sexuality. Specifically, the construction of what is holy, sanctity. Sanctity is directly related to eroticism in the hagiographies, in the lives of the saints that were written down, you know, during this period. Because it's a dialectic. A dialectic is kind of like a dialogue. You have to have two sources speaking to each other and trying to work out which one's right. So you have, on the one hand, this worshiping what is sacred, and what is sacred is ephemeral, it is transcendent, it is not part of the mundane, worldly existence, right? So you have the dialectic between the transcendent, the ephemeral, the holy, the essential, what has holy essence, versus the body, the corporeal, the profane. And profane not in like profanity, but profane in that it is mundane. It is related to worldly existence, not holy existence, right? That would be a dialectic in the ideology of Roman Catholicism. And that is related to sanctity versus eroticism. And this sanctity versus eroticism manifests itself a lot in a queer desire that you can see in a lot of the lives of the saints. There was homophobia at this time, even though we have to be careful. We can't say these people in the year 1100 were homosexual, because the sexual identity of homosexual versus heterosexual is a modern invention. It is a product of modernity of the last like 200 or 300 years or so. These concepts of he's homosexual, I'm heterosexual, those concepts didn't exist at this time. But there were still homosexual tendencies. There were still heterosexual tendencies. And the church, part of the church ideology was to promote the heterosexual tendencies at the cost of the homosexual tendencies. Sodomy, the word sodomy appears a lot in medieval texts. And it's also important to know that at that time, sodomy did not just pertain, or it was not just used as a term for anal sex. It meant any sexual act outside of the sanctity of marriage. So a woman having premarital sex was committing the sin of sodomy, just as much as a man participating in anal sex or oral sex or even masturbation. That was what they meant by sodomy. So this sanctity versus eroticism you see in the lives of the saints. In one of the texts that I'm working with is the life of, in Portuguese, or Galego-Portuguese, which is the medieval language that existed in the area that we now call Portugal. This text is from, I think, the 13th or the 14th century, and it's the life of Elforzinha, which is a translation from an original Latin text, or it may have been a translation from a French text. Anyway, it's a hagiography, a life of a saint that was written down in a vernacular language versus in Latin, which was a big move during this time. So the text, the life of Euphrosyne, also exists in Old French. La vie de Sainte Euphrosyne, I guess would be how you say it. I don't know French. I've dabbled. I've studied it a little bit, but I can't speak it. But La vie de Sainte Euphrosyne and A vida de Santa Euphrosyne, I guess. I've dabbled in Portuguese too. Spanish is my main other language, but in this text, it tells the story of this girl. Of course, she was incredibly beautiful. And of course, her father wanted to marry her off to a powerful family, the son of a powerful family. She did not, because she wanted to preserve her virginity and become a bride of Christ. So instead of running away from home to a nunnery, a convent full of nuns, where she knew she would get caught, she ran away from home. She cut off her hair. She dressed herself as a man. She changed her name to Esmeralda and claimed that she was a castrated monk. And she runs away from home and goes to live with a bunch of monks. And there's an interesting point in the story. When she first arrives as Esmeralda, the castrated monk, he incites sexual desire in the other monks. And it's not clear if the monks knew that she was a woman dressed as a man, or if it's the very fact of her performance of masculinity, plus her physical beauty, her physical beauty, that caused sexual desire amongst the other monks. So the main abbot of the monks decided, okay, you're causing too much trouble here, we're going to put you into seclusion. So she lived for decades, or he, Euphrosyne / Esmeralda, lived in seclusion for decades, and upon her death it was revealed that she was a woman and blah blah blah, and she became a saint or whatever. That is the queer aspect of some of the lives of the saints, and I'm relating that queer reading with a contemporary novel. Let me get it. So Far From God by Ana Castillo. This is from 1993. It is a Chicana feminist novel. So it takes place in Arizona. It's written by a woman of Mexican descent who lives in the United States, hence Chicana. She's feminist and she's queer because there's lesbian characters and stuff in the novel. What Ana Castillo does is she takes the story of another saint, medieval saint, Saint Christina Mirabilis, or Christina the Astonishing, who lived from around the years 1150 to 1224, and her story was written down about 8 years after her death, so in the 1200s. She uses that story as the basis to build her own hagiographies, because the female characters in this novel turn into saints, but they're not saints according to the rules and approval of the Roman Catholic Church. They are saints with the approval of their community. So in a way this is kind of a satire, but in another way the text highlights the queerness that you find in the medieval text. So let me define queer a little bit. I know I talked about queer theory as a field in academia. Queer, it is not a sexual identity, at least according to the way it's understood in queer theory. It's not to say I am gay, or I am straight, or I am bi. You know, those are sexual identities. Queerness, or queer theory, proposes the idea of evading essence. It is, in some senses, it's rebelling against identity. It's To queer something means you can't put your finger on it. You can't easily identify it. It's something that disrupts the norm. It disrupts, it challenges, it changes the norm. That's what queerness does. So a queer reading of these medieval texts, just like a queer reading or writing of a novel like this, it's meant to disrupt it's supposed to disrupt the power of white privilege and heterosexual privilege, and it's supposed to highlight homoeroticism. It's supposed to highlight difference. It highlights rebellion, and it ultimately challenges the official ideologies of the Catholic Church, which are very homophobic and very, in my opinion, misogynist. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of what I'm doing with this paper. So in addition to Euphrosyne and So Far From God with Saint Christina the Astonishing, who has a fucking amazing story, by the way. I highly recommend just Google Saint Christina, and that's Christina spelled with an H, like Christ, so it's Christina. Saint Christina Mirabilis, or Christina the Astonishing, her hagiography, her story is out there. It's crazy. She was like a wild woman kind of thing. Just look up her story. But so in addition to those texts, my theoretical texts include, and these are all kind of academic-y books, but they're not too dense. I know a lot of books published for an academic audience, if you're not kind of fluent in that field's language, you get lost, and I hate that feeling. But these books aren't so full of jargon. Queering Iberian Masculinities at the Margins, and there's an article in this book that I'm using about Saint Sebastian. If you're familiar with the image of Saint Sebastian, you know it's usually a young man pierced by many arrows. Well, Saint Sebastian for centuries has been associated with homoeroticism, and he has become a queer saint in a sense. So this talks about Saint Sebastian. This is actually a book. I just have a PDF copy of one of its chapters, but Pre-Modern Sexualities, so medieval sexualities, edited by Louise Fradenberg and Carla Frachero. And this book is kind of old. Yeah, it's from 1996. So if you're interested in Western European medieval sexualities, I highly recommend this book. Another book, which is more specific to the Iberian Peninsula, is Queer Iberia. I love the image on there too. Sexualities, Cultures, and Crossings from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance, edited by Josiah Blackmore and Gregory Hutchison from 1999. And another book that I found, which I found in the form of PDF. I don't have the physical book yet. The Sex Lives of Saints by Virginia Burris, and Erotics of Ancient Hagiography. So this doesn't really focus on medieval hagiographies. It focuses specifically on like the first 700 years of the church, of the history of the church. So from like the year 400 to the year 1000, Common Era, or Annus Domini AD. So the Sex Lives of Saints and Erotics of Ancient Hagiography. And this is from 2011, so someday I'm going to actually buy the book. It's just, I have access to a university library, so if I can get material for free, I will. So yeah, so this queering, this crossing of dialectics, the erotic with the holy, and seeing that the holy cannot exist without erotic without the mundane or the profane. You can't have something that's holy without also having the unholy as a concept to balance it out, you know? I have applied that to my spiritual practice by exploring using the saints, using Catholic iconography, such as San Judas Tadeo or Saint Jude. I've actually been lighting this candle every time I sit down to work on that paper. He is the saint who's going to help you out when you're going through a time of need, when you need help real bad. So I need help sitting down and finishing these fucking papers so I can enjoy my Christmas break. So yeah, recognizing the sensual, the sexual, that is also holy. Breaking those barriers between the body and the spirit, between the transcendent and the physical, and knowing that the physical existence is just as holy as anything that may be transcendent. And a queering, or queer theory, has helped me do that. So this is me rambling about my paper. That's what I do. That's my academic work, y'all. Kind of crazy and out there, but it keeps me going. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm going to stop rambling now, and I'll see you in a few days before I get the fuck out of here and go back to Georgia and eat some Waffle House. I need some Waffle House so bad. Okay, bye.